Even with all the fan hype around Auburn at SEC Media Days, still not getting a lot of love from the media.
In the world full of podcasts, he's the undisputed heavyweight champion of hot takes, an Auburn sports homer, master of the boog, and message board legend. Get your buttons buttoned and your hats flattened because the Top Button Podcast is about to kick off. And you don't want to miss your courtside seat. Now, here's your host, Charlie 5.
Yes, sir. We're back. It's another episode of the Top Button Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Rush, a.k.a. Charlie 5, and we are ready to get after it. We were all pretty fired up, I think, from the things that Hugh said, from the things the players said, and sort of the expectations that Hugh told us to embrace this upcoming season. We were all pretty fired up about that, but after the media released their projected finishes for the SEC, it still seems like Auburn's going to have to do some work to get some love as they're projected to finish 11th in the SEC. We'll talk about all the ramifications of that, look at the schedule compared to those rankings, and then have some fun at the end. But before we do that, let's give a quick shout out to Rhoback.com. Use coupon code BARN20 to take 20% off your order. Polos, hoodies. I got my hoodie on this morning. Today, whenever you're listening, I have the hoodie on, so you can get your Auburn licensed apparel and all kinds of other things there, from polos to pullovers to pants, shorts, joggers, doesn't matter. They got it all. Save big. It's Rhoback.com. Auburn picked to finish 11th in the SEC from the SEC media at SEC Media Days. Boy, I said SEC a bunch right there in about two sentences. But yeah, I think that's kind of a bummer. It doesn't mean anything. I think it's just more of a projected, it is a projected outlook of how they feel Auburn will finish. Believe it or not, as good as Auburn feels about this roster, honestly, as good as a lot of people have, I feel like in the media have even talked about this roster, Auburn's picked to finish one spot lower than they were picked to finish last year. I think Auburn was picked to finish 10th last year, and they're picked to finish 11th this year. The schedule is pretty manageable. You only play 4 teams that are projected to finish higher than you. You get 2 of them at home. You get obviously Alabama and Georgia at home. And then Texas A&M and Oklahoma are just a couple of spots ahead of you there. So the rest are going to be below you. Last year, 11th would have been somewhere around 7-6 overall, 3-5 in the conference. I'm looking at Arkansas and Vanderbilt. We're tied at 11th with a 3-5 conference record. That would be pretty disastrous. That would be a pretty disastrous finish, I believe, for Auburn, for a multitude of reasons. Unless there were just some crazy injuries and you're just like, okay, you just kind of got all you could get out of there, and there, some freaky things happen. That would be to the point where you're maybe talking about coaching changes. So obviously that can't happen. And I don't think it will. I think Auburn's much better than a 3-5 in conference team. I think the schedule sets up for Auburn to be able to be a lot more successful, especially with that stretch in late October, November. So that's not fun. Auburn's still got some work to do to get the respect. Hugh's got some work to do to get the respect from the media to trust him again, or maybe trust him ever. To trust that there's not going to be letdowns, to trust that there's not going to be, play calling issues or communication issues or things of that nature. And that's totally understandable. I think even from a fan perspective, we should probably, have that same kind of outlook. But I do think we're more in it. We're watching it more. We're invested more. So we know that this team should be a lot better than a 3-5 in conference team. I mean, the over under on the season is still at 7.5 on most sports books. So even if Auburn goes 8-4 with a 4-4 in conference, you're a little bit better. Based off last year, you're somewhere around 9th or 10th. Last year, there's a ton of schools last year that were 5-3. There were 6 schools that were 5-3, which I think is probably going to be a pretty common record. 5-3 is going to be the SEC is just getting so very deep that I think 5-3 is probably going to start being like your. If you go over 5-3, you got a pretty good chance of winning the conference. I mean, 6-2 right there. I mean, Texas went 7-1, but 6-2 got Georgia into the SEC championship. So we look at our schedule. Let's talk about that 11th finish a little bit deeper. We look at our schedule, and I think we forget that there's a whole other side of teams that we're not playing. Texas being one, Tennessee, Ole Miss, LSU is probably going to be really good this year. They're picked to finish 4th in the conference. South Carolina had a really good year last year. Florida is kind of on the rise a tad, it seems. They finished hot last year, had a really good recruiting class, recruiting good this year, which that doesn't mean anything for the season. But they just feel good about the season. So, again, Auburn's got work to do. Auburn's got to be able to win big games. Auburn's got to be able to win the games they're supposed to win. I personally think if you stack roster versus roster, you're going to have a more talented roster than probably at least of the SEC teams you play. At least 5. You're going to have a more talented roster than at least 5, and maybe there's an even argument for at least an equal, maybe even an equal roster than maybe Texas A&M. As Auburn has the highest blue chip ratio that they've, I think, ever had since they started doing that statistic. So, again, the SEC is really deep, but from a talent perspective, Auburn's right there in the mix. They're right there in the mix for that big clump of teams in that 5-3 range. And, hey, every single one of those were pretty much in the playoff talk. Ole Miss, late. Alabama, obviously. There was an argument. They were, arguing should they have been the 12th team. South Carolina was another one, arguing should they have been in the playoff. Texas A&M, until they got beat by us, Auburn, late, was in the playoff talk. I mean, all these schools were right there in the mix. Ole Miss would have been in the playoff if they had not choked their – I think it was Florida they lost to late. So if Auburn can get to that 5-3 range in conference, I know that's not, a perfect season. That's not 10-2. That's not, 11 wins, but that gets you right there in the mix with most of the talented teams in the SEC. That gets you right there in the mix, puts you in striking range of getting in that conversation or of sneaking in to the playoffs. So I think what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot more as things keep going. I think just more and more parity because teams are able to get players and teams are able to, from the portal or wherever with rev share and NIL, teams are still able to get players, and it makes it to where that middle, you still have your elite elites, but then that middle, 6 to 8 teams are all right there neck and neck. And I think Auburn's finally, from a roster standpoint, in the position where they can be there neck and neck, where they can be there in that conversation. The media doesn't think so, and I think Auburn's still got to be able to prove it. You get a chance to do it early, but still, you got to prove it. You got to go in there and you got to make it happen, because there's really, from a roster standpoint, you should be there. We'll talk a little bit more about that and some funny things. I'm so proud of Auburn Twitter for embracing this. We'll talk about that in just a second. We'll be back right after this. So, yeah, not a ton of love. Got to get better. Got to prove it. Got to show them on the field. And this may be the year that if you show it, you start kind of garnering a little bit of respect, because you bring a lot of these players back next year. In theory, you should bring a large crux of this team back next season. You'll have to fill a few holes. But then maybe Auburn can start getting in that conversation where, hey, Auburn's one of those top half teams now. Auburn's one of those top half teams that could win it, or at least compete for it. So, got to do it on. This is a big year in many ways. A 11th finish would be disastrous for a lot. That would just derail everything that I think you've built. So, Auburn's definitely got to go out and do a little bit better. I'm proud of Auburn Twitter. I'm proud of the fan base over what I saw yesterday after the Jacquez Wilkes commitment. I really liked Auburn leaning into the golf jokes. That was a lot of fun for me, because I was really hoping for that, because it was so ridiculous of a storyline, and I know we were in that dead zone period of time where there was nothing really to talk about. And that became a massive storyline, coupled with Auburn struggling in recruiting. Hey, we got something we can point to now, even though they're not related. But after Jacquez Wilkes committed yesterday, I saw so many funny golf-related tweets and GIFs and videos and things like that just warmed my heart. I had to find one to jump in there, and I know it may look imaginative what I put out there, but it was like the first one that popped up when I put funny golf gifts. That was one of the top ones that popped up. But you had videos of Hugh actually draining putts. You had the George Bush watch this drive gif with Hugh's face. And it just speaks to the ability. There's so many things that I love about the Auburn fan base. We can go so far in each direction, and when it's to the good, it's something that's a lot of fun. And obviously, when it goes bad, it goes really, really bad. But this was good, and I want everybody to lean into it, because it's kind of mocking those out there that made a big deal out of it. That, when it really wasn't that big of a deal. So definitely good job there. And hopefully the recruiting train can keep rolling, and Auburn can get back over the next month or so. Let's see, it's July 22nd. Yeah, I think by 1 month from now, I think Braylon Womack announces his commitment on August 21st, maybe. And Auburn's looking good there. I think by that time, Auburn will have added at least 3, maybe 4 more very highly rated kids to their class. And then you're rolling. And the hype's kind of built back up. It's funny how we equate sometimes, not sometimes, it's funny how the recruiting lack of success emotions dripped over into the season. We lost recruits, therefore we were going to suck in football, and we needed to fire Hugh Freeze, and we needed to do this, and we needed to do that, when those two things could not be more unrelated. Like, just because we lost Shadarius Tootle, that did not mean that Cam Coleman was leaving the team, or that we lost Jermichael Garrett, that we weren't going to have Eric Singleton, or that if you missed out on XYZ commit, that Keldrick Falk had to leave. Like, none of those things were tied together, but the emotions around recruiting bled into feelings about the season, which is an odd phenomenon. But so what I'm hoping is, as hype starts to build back around recruiting, that you can take those feelings and parlay it into, or that we can take those feelings and parlay that into feelings about the season. That's just so strange how those two things were equated, and they're completely unrelated. So we'll see what happens. Hugh's got to prove it, man. Bottom line, Hugh's got to prove it. I think he can do it. I think he's got the roster to do it, but he's got to do it. You just have to do it. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about the hype. Let me know what you think about the projected finish. You think it's about right? You think Auburn should finish higher? What was your favorite golf meme? What was your favorite thing yesterday that popped up after the commitment that just made you laugh? There's a lot of good ones. So, guys, I really appreciate you listening. We'll be back again tomorrow. It's another episode of the Top Button Podcast. Stay buttoned.
Thanks for listening, and drive home safely.